In 1799, a package arrived in London that would shake science to its core. Inside was a creature that seemed to be crafted by a madman, with the bill of a duck, the feet of an otter, and the tail of a beaver, all on a single animal. And this specimen was so impossible that London's finest scientists took scissors to it, desperate to find stitches that would prove that it was just a hoax. But this wasn't a trick. And this would be the time that science was forced to realize that sometimes the most impossible creatures are real. So stick with us today as we uncover 7 creatures that science once deemed to be completely impossible. So when renowned naturalist George Shaw took scissors to this specimen, he was looking for any kind of evidence that would expose this as a hoax. Chinese taxidermists were known to create fake mermaids by sewing monkey parts to fish, and surely this just had to be another one of these cases. But as more specimens arrived, preserved in alcohol, an uncomfortable truth emerged. In the remote wilderness of Australia, an impossible creature had been hiding there in plain sight all along. The Aboriginal people knew of it for centuries. They called it Malangong, the shy one that lived in riverbanks. Ancient stories told of a creature that was born from a union of a duck and a water rat, creating something entirely new. The discovery of the platypus did not just challenge scientific understanding, it completely shattered it. Here you had a mammal that laid eggs, with the bill of a duck that could sense electrical signals, and this gentle creature with venom so powerful it could drop a man. And this discovery forced science to understand something very uncomfortable. Sometimes the most impossible creatures are real, and this wouldn't be the last time. What's the most bizarre animal you've ever heard of? Let us know in the comments. Now, while the platypus was challenging scientific understanding in Europe, deep in the jungles of Africa, another impossible creature was about to emerge from legend. For generations, the Fang people of Gabon told stories of the Ngui, a massive forest creature that possessed both human and spiritual qualities. Oral history described beings of incredible strength that walked upright through the jungle and beat their chests to warn intruders away from their territory. Other tribes spoke of the Ngagi, forest giants that could bend trees with their bare hands. Western explorers just dismissed these stories as superstition. But in 1847, Paul du Chaillu decided to take these legends seriously. And when he returned from Gabon with an actual gorilla skull, the scientific community was forced to confront their prejudices. This specimen was unlike anything in the natural history museums of Europe, much larger than a chimpanzee's, with a massive jaw muscle and a pronounced sagittal crest that hinted at tremendous strength. But still, scientists remained skeptical. They claimed that du Chaillu had just discovered an enormous chimpanzee or fabricated the skull entirely. But that skepticism vanished when he returned with a complete specimen. The Lowland Gorilla stood nearly 6 feet tall, with arms as big as tree branches and hands twice the size of man's. The Fang people's legends had been vindicated. The giant truly existed. Half a century after du Chaillu's gorilla shocked the world, another mysterious creature was challenging scientists in the Congo. In 1901, Sir Harry Johnston was about to learn that sometimes the greatest discoveries come from chasing the wrong legend entirely. Johnston had ventured into the Semliki forests in search of a miniature elephant. The Mbuti people had described these beings in great detail, perfectly formed elephants no larger than a pig. But as Johnston ventured deeper into the jungle, his guides started whispering to him about something else entirely, something far stranger. They called it Okapi, a forest ghost that moved like a shadow through the deepest vegetation. And at first, Johnston dismissed these stories. He was completely focused on finding this elephant. But when an Mbuti hunter burst into camp holding this striped skin that was unlike anything in any scientific records, Johnston's quest changed forever. The hunter's hands trembled as he described how he'd finally caught one of the forest ghosts. And then for months, Johnston became obsessed with this new mystery. Each fragment of evidence, a footprint here, a tuft of hair there, it just deepened his conviction that he'd stumbled onto something completely extraordinary. And when he finally obtained an intact specimen, the scientific world was forced to acknowledge what the Mbuti had known for generations. A creature with the face of a giraffe and the stripes of a zebra that moved as silent as death itself. The Okapi had been found. And while the miniature elephants that led Johnston into the Congo to begin with remain undiscovered to this day, his willingness to listen when nature offered a different mystery led to one of zoology's greatest discoveries, proving that sometimes the most remarkable findings come from following an unexpected trail. And just months after Johnston's discovery in the Congo, the Virunga Mountains would yield yet another incredible secret. What other mysterious creatures might be hiding in plain sight? Make sure to hit that subscribe button and join our cryptid community. Local tribes in the Virunga Mountains spoke of these enormous aggressive apes that walked upright through the misty peaks. And Western explorers just dismissed these tales as just folklore. Well, at least until October 17, 1902. Captain Robert von Behring and his expedition were scaling the volcanic slopes when suddenly they noticed two enormous black figures emerging from the mist. And standing over 6 feet tall, these creatures were larger than any apes they had ever seen. And when von Behring's specimen reached the Berlin Natural Museum, scientists were stunned. This wasn't just another gorilla, it was an entirely new subspecies. The mountain gorilla proved larger, more robust, and more aggressive than its lowland cousin. And its discovery forced scientists to accept that legendary creatures might still exist in Earth's most remote places. Unfortunately, today, fewer than 1,000 mountain gorillas still exist in their Misty Mountain Sanctuary. But their discovery changed how we view native folklore forever. Now, as these African great apes were gaining scientific recognition, on remote Indonesian islands, pearl fishermen were talking about something even more terrifying. In 1910, Lieutenant Steve von Hunsbroek heard stories from pearl fishermen that seemed impossible. They spoke of massive lizards on these remote Indonesian islands, monsters that could grow longer than 2 men laid end to end. The local Atomato people called them ora, land crocodiles that would attack deer and even humans. But most Western explorers again dismissed these as mere fantasy. Von Hinsbroek decided to investigate, and what he found on Komodo Island shocked the scientific world. It was a massive lizard, unlike anything known to science. But even his reports were met with skepticism until 1926 when W. Douglas Burden mounted an expedition to capture living specimens. What Burden's team discovered exceeded even the wildest local legends. The Komodo dragons weren't just large lizards. They were apex predators. They hunted in packs using intelligence and skill to bring down prey as large as water buffalo. And their saliva contained a deadly bacteria that could kill an animal with a single bite. They could smell blood from miles away, and they ran up to 12 miles per hour. And the largest specimen they encountered measured over 10 feet long and weighed over 300 pounds. And this discovery sent shockwaves through the scientific community. Here was a living dragon, a creature that seemed to have stepped straight out of mythology. In fact, Burden's tales of these prehistoric monsters on this remote island inspired Marion C. Cooper to create King Kong, proving that sometimes reality actually can be more fantastic than fiction. Remote areas can hide many mysteries. What do you think science still has yet to discover? Leave a comment below and let us know. Now, while Burden's dragons were making headlines, another Indonesian mystery would take 6 decades to be discovered. Deep in the shrouded peaks of Indonesia's Papua province, the Moni people talked of a creature known as the Bondegezou, or man of the forest. They had another name for it, the Bondegezou, or the forbidden animal. They described it as something that seemed to dance between reality and myth, an ape-like being that walked upright through the mountain forests, with black and white fur that made it look like it was in traditional ceremonial costume. To the Moni people, the Bondegezou wasn't just another animal. It was an ancestral spirit, a bridge between the physical world and the spiritual realm. And Western scientists dismissed these claims until 1987, when Australian research team leader Tim Flannery received a startling piece of evidence. A local hunter had photographed one of these creatures in the wild, providing the first documentation of this legendary forest spirit. And the real breakthrough came when a team of researchers tracked one down. And what they discovered was a new species of tree kangaroo, but one so unusual in its appearance and behavior that it seemed to validate centuries of folklore. The Bondegezou stood upright like a human, with its black and white fur creating this illusion of a ceremonial dress, just as the Moni people had described it. And this discovery proved something that cryptozoologists had long suspected, that even in the modern era, legendary creatures could still emerge from Earth's most remote places. Even more importantly, it showed that indigenous knowledge, passed down through generations, often held crucial clues to understanding our world's hidden wonders. But perhaps the most remarkable discovery was yet to come. In 2004, at depths that no human could venture, technology would finally reveal a creature that had haunted maritime legend for centuries. For hundreds of years, sailors have spoken of giant tentacles rising from the water and dragging entire ships beneath the waves. And these weren't just tall tales told by drunken mariners. In 1873, a minister and a young boy were attacked off of Bell Island, Newfoundland, by what they described as a giant squid. It wrapped its tentacles around their boat and tried to pull it under until they hacked it away with an axe. This severed tentacle measured 19 feet long, just a piece of what would eventually prove to be one of the world's most elusive ocean monsters. Scientists remained skeptical even as giant carcasses washed ashore on remote beaches. And then in 1881, the HMS Allecton encountered what they called a giant squid in the waters off of Tenerife. The crew actually managed to harpoon that creature, and as they hauled it aboard, its massive body tore away and it sunk back into the depths of the ocean. And only a piece remained, proving again that these monsters were real. And then for over a century, scientists tried to document this giant squid. Dozens of expeditions failed. Then, in 2004, Japanese researchers made history. At nearly 3,000 feet beneath the surface, they finally managed to capture images of a giant squid in its natural habitat. 8 years later, they filmed one alive for the very first time, revealing a creature more incredible than any sailor's tale, measuring up to 43 feet long with eyes the size of dinner plates. And this discovery proves something that cryptozoologists have long suspected. Our oceans hide incredible creatures, just waiting to be discovered. So from the duck-billed oddity that baffled science in the 18th century, to a deep-sea giant that was finally caught on film in 2004, these creatures remind us that the impossible sometimes only waits to be discovered. Each of these creatures challenged scientific understanding at the time, and each began as a story just dismissed as mere folklore. So today, as we venture into Earth's most remote places, we have to ask ourselves, what other legendary creatures might be waiting to cross over from myth to reality? And perhaps the next great discovery will come not from just dismissing the impossible, but from actually listening to those who have lived with the mysteries all along. Thanks for sticking around. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and join our cryptid community. Have a lot of great content coming up. If you've ever had your own cryptid encounter, reach out to me either in the comments or by hitting me up at cryptidcrossings@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you, and I'd love to feature you on a future video. Again, thanks for tuning in. Until next time, stay curious. You never know what lurks in the shadows.